I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned the lock and walked away. Strange reaction, right? Most people would have burst through that door, demanded answers, made noise. But I didn't. And there's a reason for that. My name is Varel Kane. I'm 67 years old, and when you've lived long enough, you learn that the quiet moments, those are the ones that tell the truth. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That afternoon, I wasn't supposed to be home. The sky was still bright, the kind of soft gold light that makes everything look harmless. I had left my volunteer shift early. Headache, nothing serious. I remember thinking how nice it would be to sit in silence for once. But then I turned onto my street, and something felt off immediately. My husband's car was in the driveway. Delmar doesn't break routine, not in 42 years of marriage, not once. If he says he'll be at the community board until 6, he's there until 6. That's who he is. So why was his car there at 4? I slowed down, just a little. Then I parked, and I sat there longer than I should have. Have you ever had that feeling? That quiet, creeping certainty that something is wrong before you even know what it is? I stepped out of the car. The house looked normal. Too normal. Curtains drawn just slightly, more than usual. The front window reflecting nothing back at me, like it was hiding something. Then I walked up the path, and that's when I saw it. A pair of shoes by the door. Not mine, not his. Smaller, sleeker, new. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I just listened. And then I heard them. Voices. One was Delmar's. The other wasn't. Softer, younger, closer than it should have been. I stopped with my hand on the door. Did I knock? No, because in that moment, I understood something very clearly. Whatever was happening inside that house was never meant for me to witness. So I didn't open the door. I just stood there and listened. And what I heard next made everything fall into place. Most people would have walked in right then. I chose not to. Instead, I turned the knob just enough to unlock the door and left it closed. Then I leaned in. Quiet. Still. Listening. At first, the voices were low, muffled, careful. But when you've spent over 4 decades with someone, you learn their tones, not just their words. Delmar wasn't speaking the way he spoke to me. His voice was softer, almost pleading. I hadn't heard that version of him in years. And the woman? She sounded uneasy, not comfortable, not relaxed. That was the first thing that didn't fit. Then I heard her say something clearer. "This isn't what you promised." I froze. Promised? What exactly had he promised her? I stayed where I was, my hand still resting against the door, my breath shallow now, not from panic, but from something colder, something sharper. Understanding. You see, this wasn't the first time something felt off. Over the past year, Delmar had changed in ways that were easy to dismiss if you wanted peace more than truth. Late phone calls he'd take outside. New shirts he didn't need. Errands that stretched longer than they should. And every time I asked, he'd smile. That tight, dismissive smile. "Varel, you're overreacting." He said it so often it almost became routine, like clockwork, like I was the unreliable one. But standing there, listening, I realized something. I wasn't confused. I wasn't imagining things. I had just been patient. Inside, the woman spoke again, more tense this time. I don't like this. What if she comes back? A pause. Then Delmar, quieter now. She won't. That did it. That was the moment something inside me settled completely. Not anger, not heartbreak. Certainty. I slowly stepped back from the door, careful not to make a sound. Then I reached for the handle and gently pulled it closed all the way. The click was soft, final. My hand moved to the lock. Now here's the thing about our house. Old build, older hardware. The front door lock? It can be turned from the outside. And once it is, it doesn't open from the inside without a key. I turned it. Slowly. Deliberately. And then I stepped back onto the porch. No rush, no hesitation. For the first time in a long while, everything made perfect sense. 10 minutes doesn't sound like much, until you're the one trapped inside. I sat down on the porch bench. Same spot I'd used for years. Morning coffee, quiet evenings, watching nothing in particular. Only this time, I wasn't watching the street. I was listening to my own house. At first, nothing changed. Just low voices, movement. The kind of normal that tries very hard to stay normal. Then came the sound. A door handle turning. Once. Twice. Then harder. A pause, and then, "What the hell?" Delmar, sharp now, confused. I didn't move, didn't react. I just sat there, hands folded neatly in my lap, as if I were waiting for a bus instead of whatever this was. Inside, the woman's voice rose, thinner now. "Why isn't it opening?" Another rattle. Louder this time, more force. The calm was breaking. "You locked it?" she asked. "I didn't—" Delmar stopped mid-sentence. And in that silence, I could almost hear the realization land. Heavy, immediate. She's here. That was the exact moment everything shifted. The energy inside changed instantly, confusion turning into something tighter, something desperate. Footsteps, faster now. The handle jerked again, aggressive this time. "Thorell!" he called out. Loud. Too loud. Like saying my name would undo the situation. I tilted my head slightly, but I didn't answer. Inside, the woman's voice cracked. "You said she'd be gone." There it was. Clear. Undeniable. Not a misunderstanding, not a coincidence. A plan. And suddenly, she wasn't just part of the situation. She was realizing she'd been misled too. Interesting. I exhaled slowly. Not relief, not satisfaction, just acknowledgement. Years of being told I was overthinking, overreacting, misreading, and now everything was speaking for itself. The pounding started, loud, rhythmic, frantic. "Open the door!" Delmar shouted. I could hear the edge in his voice now, the one he never let slip in public. Control. Slipping. That's when something else changed. Not inside the house. Outside. A door across the street opened. Then another. Neighbours. Curiosity travels fast in quiet neighbourhoods. The noise was drawing attention. And then In the distance, faint at first, but unmistakable. Sirens. Getting closer. I glanced down the street, watching the flashing lights begin to reflect off parked cars. Still, I didn't stand, didn't reach for the lock, didn't say a word. Because now, it wasn't just between us anymore. Now, there were witnesses. And as the sirens grew louder, I realized something almost ironic. This was no longer a private mistake. It was about to become a very public one. By the time the fire truck stopped in front of my house, the entire street was watching. You could feel it in the air, that shift, curiosity turning into spectacle. Neighbours gathered in small clusters, pretending not to stare while clearly staring. Doors half open, phones subtly raised. Whispers passing from one person to another like a quiet chain reaction. And through it all, I remained exactly where I was, seated, still, waiting. The sirens cut off abruptly as the fire truck came to a halt. 2 firefighters stepped out first, scanning the house quickly, professionally. To them, this was just another call, a possible emergency, someone trapped inside. They approached the front path, boots heavy against the pavement, eyes flicking between me and the door that was now being pounded from the inside. "Ma'am," one of them called out, firm but controlled. "Is someone inside?" I looked at him, held his gaze, and answered simply, "Yes." No panic, no urgency, just a fact. Another loud bang from inside. "Open the door!" Delmar shouted again, his voice strained now, cracking under pressure. The second firefighter stepped forward, testing the handle. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder. Still nothing. He glanced back at his partner. It stuck. Inside, the woman's voice was higher now, almost frantic. "What's happening? Why won't it open?" The sound of movement, faster, less controlled. Something knocked over. The situation was escalating, exactly as expected. The first firefighter turned back to me, more direct this time. "Ma'am, do you have a key?" A pause, a very small one. Then I said, "Yes." Another pause followed, longer this time, because I didn't move, didn't reach into my pocket, didn't stand up. Behind them, more neighbours had gathered. The quiet murmurs were no longer subtle. Everyone understood now. Something unusual was happening. Inside, Delmar's voice broke through again, louder than before. "Varel! Open this door right now!" There it was. Confirmation. Confirmation. Clear. Clear. Undeniable. The firefighter's expression shifted slightly, not confusion anymore, but assessment. He stepped back, knocked firmly on the door. "Fire department! Step away from the door!" Inside, movement scrambled, panic now fully exposed. The firefighter turned to his partner and gave a short nod, then, louder, "We're going to force entry." I watched as they positioned themselves, tools in hand. Measured. Efficient. Final. The first strike hit the door with a heavy crack that echoed down the street. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The second strike splintered the frame, and as the wood began to give way, as everything inside that house rushed toward exposure, I stayed exactly where I was, because I already knew. The moment that door opened, nothing would be hidden anymore. The third strike broke the door open. Wood splintered inward. The lock gave way with a sharp crack. And just like that, the inside of my home wasn't private anymore. The firefighters stepped in first, professional, focused, but even they couldn't ignore what they were walking into. Delmar stood just a few feet from the entrance, face flushed, shirt half buttoned wrong, composure completely gone. And beside him, Lysen Vark, 34. I recognized her immediately. Not personally, but by association. She'd been mentioned before, briefly, casually, someone from the community board. That's how Delmar had framed it. Now she stood there, pale, shaken, arms wrapped tightly around herself, not just embarrassed, but blindsided. Because this wasn't what she expected either. "What's going on here?" one firefighter asked, scanning the room. No one answered right away, because there wasn't a simple answer. Only the truth, sitting there, exposed. Delmar looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in years, he didn't have control of the conversation. "Varel," he started, voice uneven. "This isn't..." "Overreacting?" I finished calmly. The word landed harder than anything else in the room. He stopped, because we both knew how many times he'd used it, how easily he'd dismissed me with it. Now it didn't fit anymore. Not here. Not like this. Lysen glanced between us, confusion turning into realization. "You said," she began, her voice quieter now. "You said things were basically over." Delmar didn't respond, because there was nothing left to construct. No version of the story that held up anymore. Everything had already been revealed. What actually happened? Delmar had been seeing Lysen for over a year. Careful, scheduled, hidden inside routines he thought were unbreakable. He brought her into our home only when he believed I'd be gone long enough. That day, he miscalculated, and I chose not to interrupt. I chose to contain. What happened after? The aftermath didn't stay quiet. It couldn't. Neighbours had seen everything. Fire truck, forced entry, shouting. Stories spread fast, and not in his favour. The fire department filed a report. Property damage, forced entry, statements taken. Nothing criminal, but nothing subtle either. Within weeks, Delmar's position on the community board became untenable. Lysen distanced herself quickly. Not dramatically, just decisively. Whatever she thought she was part of, it wasn't this. And me? I filed for divorce. No hesitation. Evidence mattered. And now there was more than enough of it. Legally, it worked in my favour. Assets divided with clarity, not argument. Final resolution. A month later, the door was replaced. New frame, new wood, new lock. One that only opens when I decide it does. I sat on the same porch again, just like that afternoon. Same light, same quiet street. But nothing felt uncertain anymore. Because the difference wasn't what I discovered, it was what I finally stopped ignoring. He said I was overreacting. But in the end, I was the only one who understood exactly what needed to be done.